Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I hope this morning's business meeting was both informative and energizing as we discussed the health of our organization from both a financial and programmatic position. One way in which our organization is able to achieve our goals and to expand our footprint is through the generous contributions of our donors. Believing deeply in the importance of philanthropy and the power of giving, I have targeted some of my efforts as president to cultivate donors who have shown their commitment to the Academy. In one conversation I had that continued over the course of a few months, I was blown away by the passion for which this individual spoke about the Academy. She has spent her career writing books, serving as an editor-in-chief of a nursing journal, working on Capitol Hill as a policy advisor, as well as educating and mentoring the next generation with the singular purpose of improving health through policy. This incredible individual has agreed to donate $100,000 to the Academy. She has provided $50,000 this year already and committed $10,000 over the next 5 years. Please help me welcome and thank Dr. Jerry Milstead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I am happy, very happy to offer this gift to the Academy. I'm not a rich woman. I wasn't born into money. I didn't inherit money. I didn't marry money. In fact, what resources I have, I earned myself, especially after my husband, as many of you, especially after my husband died suddenly at 42. We had 3 teenagers and a 10-year-old plus a brand new mortgage. So I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. I live a frugal life, nothing flamboyant, and I didn't even think about philanthropy until a few years ago. But once I did, I thought carefully about where I might make a difference. Most of my professional life has been focused in public policy, the process of decision-making, leadership, and choices. The American Academy of Nurses recognizes that link between practice and policy. The vision, the mission, the goals are all policy-directed and reflect my own values. The structure is different from other organizations, as you've noticed. The expert panels, the Riba de Tournai Development Fund, the Institute for Nursing Leadership, the Edge Runners, and the Council for the Advancement of Nursing Science. Fellows actually celebrate nurses and successes and identify and analyze health problems and recommend solutions to policymakers, and the policymakers listen. They do listen. So I figured my donation should, let me back up a minute. Nurses are educated, creative, and compassionate, and shrewd. We also demonstrate inspirational leadership, and truth be told, we're all a little bit OCD, I think. We like to get things done. If we don't become involved in changing public policy, then we will continue to court ourselves and work ourselves to the point of depression, burnout, and renouncement of the profession. I figured my donation should hurt a little bit, that is, extend beyond what I thought I could manage. So I decided to provide half my gift now and the other half over a period of 5 years. That way, the donation is doable for me. So I encourage each of you to consider making a contribution individually or even in small groups that is doable for you. I thank our president, Dr. Ken White, our CEO, Dr. Suzanne Miyamoto, our incredible staff, and aren't they though, and all my colleagues. I am honored to be a fellow of the American Academy of Nurses, and I do believe my gift will further our work together in the policy arena. Thank you.
Jerry, you're an inspiration to us all. $50,000 as we launch our 50th anniversary.
Yay.
What a moment you have created for us. Soon the Academy will be launching its 50 for 50 campaign, designed by the Academy's Develop and 50th Anniversary Committees. Jerry, we hope that you continue to serve as a catalyst for all of us to think about how we can contribute our time and treasure to this dedicated body of nurses. We have a little something for you here. Here behind the white line for a picture. We also have flowers to go in the vase that we'll present her later. So now it's an honor and a privilege to be the Academy President as the organization celebrates its 50th year of history making in 2023. In 2020, a 50th anniversary task force was convened for the purpose of generating recommendations to the Board of Directors on the purpose and scope of the anniversary activities. The board approved the task force's recommendations in June of 2020, and a formal 50th anniversary committee was established in late 2021 to build upon those recommendations. The committee has been charged with a 3-year arc that, 1, interprets and reflects on the Academy's history and journey to influence policy that improves health worldwide. 2, celebrates individuals and organizations whose contributions have made the Academy a source of influence. 3, positions the Academy to envision and create future impact towards a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable fellowship that collaborates widely within and outside the organization to advance policies that reduce disparities and champion health equity. Each year has a theme. This year our theme is reflection. Next year, the actual year, is celebration. And 2024, it's our year to envision the future. Integral to the planning process and resulting activities are a few core tenets, including fiscal responsibility, diversity and inclusivity, and owning up to our own history, both where we have succeeded and where we have fallen short. We will seek out additional expertise to achieve the committee's goals. Now I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists for our fireside chat, who are going to help us lean into our year of reflection. While I'm sure they need no introduction, I'd like to call them to the stage. Moderating this panel is Dr. Joanne Disch, Chair of the 50th Anniversary Committee, Academy Past President, and Living Legend. Dr. Disch is also the professor at Honorem at the University of Minnesota School of Nursing. Joining her is Ms. Barbara Nichols, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Senior Advisor with the Campaign for Action. Ms. Nichols is a 50th Anniversary Committee member, Academy Living Legend, and past President of the American Nurses Association. And Dr. Franklin Shaffer, President and Chief Executive Officer of CGFNS International, and he is a 50th Anniversary Committee member, and one of our 22 Living Legends, as you know from last night. I will now turn it over to Joanne to begin the discussion as they arrive on the stage.
Thank you, Ken, and good morning, everyone. As Ken mentioned, I'm Joanne Disch, and I have the pleasure of serving as chair of the Academy's 50th Anniversary Committee. I want to echo Ken in recognizing the members of the committee for lending their time and creativity. As he mentioned, we have embarked on a 3-year arc to reflect, celebrate, and envision the future of the Academy. There's too much to celebrate in 1 year. All of the contributions of the members, the partnering organizations, and the key moments that have shaped the Academy into what it is today. For the next half hour, I will ask my colleagues, Barbara Nichols and Frank Shaffer, who have some wonderful stories, some of which we can share, some of which you'll have to pull them aside to get later because they can't be broadcast to a big room, to reflect on a few of these key moments. I have to say, we are all disappointed that Angela Barron McBride, who was also supposed to be with us, and you may have seen on an earlier version of the agenda, that she would be here joining us on stage with her reflections. Unfortunately, her husband had a fall last week and is unable to bear weight. He's doing okay, but obviously she felt she needed to be at home. So she did send some thoughts, which I'll share. So I've asked all three of these living legends, Angela from home and Barbara and Frank here, to share with you some candid thoughts on the Academy's early days, some of the challenges that we encountered, and maybe where we dropped the ball a time or two, where we didn't quite hit the mark, and then what we maybe need to think about doing briefly as we go forward. Now, we will not have questions and answers in this session for a couple of reasons, but when I bring to a conclusion our comments, I will point out what we will ask you to do to keep the arc moving over the next 3 years. Thank you. Well, it's again wonderful to be here with you, and I'm going to start with a few of Angela's memories. And I'm going to emphasize that these are reflections and the memories of those of us who are commenting. You may have a different recollection, and so this is not God's truth. It's sort of what we recall, and time can kind of blur our memories. So you may want to pull each other together out in the hall and clarify a couple of these things. But one of the things that Angela recalled is that early on, the Academy wasn't as committed as it is today to policy development. She noted that the Academy strengthened its policy emphasis in the first half of the 90s. The ANA moved from Kansas City to DC to be near the center of national policy making. The Academy hired its first executive director, Jan Heinrich, who Angela would laud endlessly, feeling that she was really pivotal in redirecting the Academy to be more policy focused. She was very savvy in this area. The annual meeting was then more oriented to policy. One meeting highlighted gun control and included the Bradys, who were promoting the eventually passed Brady bill. So we worked closely with them to eventuate that national policy. Interest groups were encouraged to think about preparing policy-oriented reviews or statements that might be published. And at one point, we started talking about, I was on the board at an earlier time, that maybe we should meet more consistently in DC to be able to advance this policy. But those of you who have been in the Academy for quite a while will remember that, and perhaps enjoyed the meetings periodically in La Jolla and in Acapulco. And so, frankly, there was some pushback about, why do we need to go to Washington? It's so lovely here. Well, nobody could fly to La Jolla to have a policy conference the week before the election. So we moved to DC, but even that wasn't without controversy. So those are some of Angela's thoughts, but I want to talk with Barbara, who has a really unique lens from her connection between ANA and the Academy. So I'm going to ask Barbara if you could talk a little bit about some recollections that you have about the birthing of the Academy.
Yes. I was on, I was on the ANA board in 1974 when the notion of the Academy was presented. The idea challenged the prevailing dogma, and it was viewed as an alien concept, and it disrupted the traditional nursing fiefdoms and hierarchies. Its birth can be characterized as born not as a breach, but with controversy and contradiction. Now, in 1974, besides the Academy being birthed, two other major events occurred in the world. Nixon resigned due to the Watergate travails. Golda Meir stepped down from being the Prime Minister of Israel based on the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War. And Germany launched this new idea for a car called the Volkswagen. So Reba de Tournier was really the champion and the birth mother of the Academy. Reba felt it was inevitable. Reba said, "This is an idea whose time has come." and she would not take no for an answer.
That's right.
She said, I'm sick of this stereotype that a dealer, a dollar, a nurse is no scholar. Because at that time, physicians, psychologists, sociologists, the dogs and everybody else, cats, birds, were writing about nurses, nursing, and defining our practice. And Reba said, this is enough. We have enough intelligence to do this on our own. She then went all around the United States advocating the need for this entity. And she said, the profession needs to do this ethically on behalf of our commitment to society and on our passion and belief that nurses are intelligent, and without us, care will not be equitable in its giving. So that was really, yes, that was really very good of her. She was successful, I believe, because she would not take no for an answer. And she had a keen intellect and was a master at nuancing critical public policy discussion, and she had flawless judgment. And how can you say no to Reba when she is being so nice? You know, rather than saying, y'all don't know what you're talking about, this is dumb, we need to have the academy, Reba would say, no, Barbara, that's an interesting idea. Can you share with me how you got to that point? I'd like to know how you think about this. So what I observed in watching Reba is that, as the saying goes, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And thus, you really need to temper your approach when you're trying to convince someone of an idea that is considered alien. So she passionately articulated, advocated for the relevance of creating the academy, which would honor, in her view, the dignity, the intelligence, the passion, and the commitment of not only nurses, but the nursing profession.
Excellent, thank you. Isn't that interesting? And obviously we honor Reba today, very appropriately. Frank, you have different experiences, probably anything early that sticks in your mind of
Well, I could
early
also
days.
pick up on Reba, because Reba convinced me that I should become a fellow of the Academy. So she wanted to nominate me, and Lucy Kelly, and then the other person, I forget. But anyhow, I was not selected. And so I said, Reba, but how do we go about doing this the right way so that I can get selected? She said, you've got to know what you're working with. I said, me? I need to do more. But now she said, well, I'm not saying that exactly, but you got to understand who is going to be on the committee and da-da-da-da. Reba taught me a lot about people, how you work with them, how you get the best out of them. And I have a bent toward philanthropy. And so she would say, always, make sure you study the one you're going after for the money. And you've got to get that connection that will build in for you this relationship. But I'd like to advance another point. I also think in the early years of the Academy, for me, it was the voices of my peers, the voices of those who I highly regarded and respected. Muriel Poulin, Maggie McClure. If I heard once, I must have heard 100 times. It's the think tank for nursing, and that's what we've got to be. And I think as I listened to those voices, it all started connecting better for me. I think that our history is rich. I think collectively that we can build on what they brought to the table. And I know with Maggie McClure at the Magnet Conference the other day, she and I had just a little bit of time to chat, but Muriel Poulin, Maggie McClure, and Juan Delp were all friends of mine. And so at that time, when they chartered the study, it meant a lot to all of us, because I was a nurse exec. So I wanted to know what were the retention factors in our hospitals. That time was also Dwayne Walker. I don't know if any of you remember Dwayne Walker, but he was the only nurse executive that didn't have a shortage in his hospital. And the Magnet study came about how that all occurred.
Excellent, thank you. Different histories,
Yeah.
and we're going to invite you to in a process I'm going to outline later, share yours. I want to turn a little bit to some of the things that we did well as an academy, any highlights, and there are many, we were not going to cover them all, but just what pops in your mind, and then maybe where we dropped the ball, didn't quite hit the target and could do better. I'll share first with one that Angela shared with me, and this is about the living legends, which we just enjoyed the ceremony last night. Congratulations, Frank.
Thank you.
Well deserved. And this 130 altogether, 75 that are still with us. Angela was president of the Academy when the Living Legends program was launched in 1994, the first cohort. And she described the reason for its creation, which I had sort of heard, but not in the way that, and she could describe it, as you can imagine, on the stage so much more eloquently than I am conveying her words. But she said there was a problem that we were trying to solve. Older fellows were not coming to the meetings because they didn't know the new fellows. And conversely, the younger, newer fellows didn't know who the older fellows were because nursing history was not being taught much. And so the board came up with the idea of identifying a handful, usually 3 or 4 in the earlier years, but between 3 and 7 over the years, to conceive it as a way of recognizing individuals regarded as leaders within a group of leaders. And she added, we kidded that these people were those who everybody knew by their first name. And she recounted Luther, Reba, Rosella, Faye, Hildegard, Jessie, Harriet. And there may be others that you are recalling from your own experiences that you would know by their first name. And then when I was on the board, we did have some discussion as well about, which was mentioned last night, I think by Bill Holzheimer, that somebody said, well, there are so many excellent people. What if somebody has died? Can we recognize them? And somebody said, well, we do call them living legends. And maybe down the road we'll find some other way to recognize others. But that was sort of how we came onto this wonderful program that has now been operational not quite 30 years. So, Frank, I'll go to you first. What's a positive thing that you think the Academy should take credit for?
I think, Robbie, one of the most important things to me has been how we are recognizing our own. And I think, as I listen to people, when they talk about the Academy, it is something I think that almost everybody aspires for. And I think if we can have that in nursing, where we can aspire for something, where we're going to represent our own and have the exemplaries that we need in the profession. I had the opportunity to know a number of these living legends. One that I would mention would be Clifford Jordan, John Gard, Bob Piemonte, I mentioned him last night. Bob was my mentor, as I said, but Bob was the last male in 2008 that was admitted into the Academy's Living Legend until last night, 2008. I had the opportunity to give his remarks. So I think that we all can aspire through the Academy, but I think it brings together our collective voices. And I would love to see all the specialty nursing organizations, along with the ANA and the Academy, come together over public policy more than we are today.
Great. Barbara, any positive memories for you?
Yes, a few. The Academy doesn't give itself credit for being inclusive. And Reba and the early presidents felt, although this will be an entity for a select few, it needs to embrace all nurses.
Yes.
And so they were adamant about making sure that women of color were included right from the very beginning. And that is something that isn't really understood in its history. Structurally, the original rules were that the total membership of the Academy from birth to death would be 1,500. Yeah. And the only way you got in is when somebody died. And then you could replace that person, but the total N would only be 1,500. Nobody remembers that now, right? Which I think is interesting. so that the new fellows would replace those who had passed away, and the forever total membership would be 1,500. And we know now, from an economic standpoint, that would not help with survival. So I think that that's important. In the early years, you have to remember that ANA insisted that in order to be a member of the Academy, you had to be an ANA member. Why was that? Because in the early 70s, ANA lost about 8, which they then called structural units. The National Council of State Boards of Nursing, before it broke off and put N in front of its name, used to be the State Board Test Pool Examiners and the Council for Nursing Education. When they left ANA, they became, quote, the National Council. And many of the specialty organizations that were divisions of practice in ANA, like maternal child health, critical care, they were structural units, became their own national society. So ANA experienced a lot of its children leaving. And of course, that was a problem for ANA in terms of keeping its membership. And then, of course, the other positive thing I would say is that because the Academy mother, if you will, besides REBA, was the ANA president came to all of the award ceremonies and gave out the certificates. So I have pictures of me in the early 70s with various nurses being inducted into the Academy. Now you don't see ANA involved in that way at all. And I'm not saying that's bad, I'm just saying that that's showing the difference. As the Academy grew, it became more self-determinate. So I thought that that was very interesting. Finally, I would say inclusivity and equity were there right from the very beginning, and it was not viewed as it is now, as an affirmative action goal or a health equity goal. I would say it in the words of REBA. It was just the right thing to do ethically for the nursing profession, right? Our patient population includes all kinds of folks. And thus, REBA always felt that the Academy should represent that same ideology. So I think those were some of the things that were well done. And the Academy doesn't always give itself a pat on the back for that.
Agreed.
And then the final thing I would say here is what makes the Academy taking that position. In 1974, we were only 6 years away where the last state nurses association, because there were state nurses associations that did not accept blacks. And you could only join, in those states, you could only join ANA at the national level. So the fact that the Academy had this, we're all in this together approach was quite meaningful from a historical standpoint. And it did provide, because nurses of color were in the Academy early on, it made it seem more, if you would, equitable, but it was. So it wasn't something that was thought about, it was an activity that they did. And I don't think the Academy takes credit for that, per se.
Thank you. Very good, Bob.
And then the final thing, which I feel should not be rationalized, because I want to remind you of this historical fact. As a generalization, black nurses specifically, and nurses of color in general, tend to be more educated than the general nursing population. So if you read the data, you will find that more nurses of color have baccalaureate and higher degrees than the majority of nurses in America who are white. But you don't necessarily see that reflected in the Academy. We're doing good, but we need to do better in that regard.
That's great. I think one thing I would add, taking off a little bit from Barbara, is what I see as sort of a both-and tone or personality for the Academy. And by that I mean, over the years we've worked with the expert panels who have incredible depth, expertise. And then we also have the opportunity to come together with our shared profession. And I think that's been very clever,
Yes.
the way the Academy has really intentionally tried to maintain that. Because many years ago, there was thought about, well, really, how can we best use? Maybe we can't. Maybe we don't need the expert panels. And there were many people who said they are the sub-thought leaders within the Academy to go deep on topics that are crucial, and then we come together to look at issues of common concern. And so being part of a specialty organization, Critical Care, that was very focused on critical care, what we missed sometimes was that ability to get together with other colleagues who are in operating room or primary care or school nursing or whatever. So I think one of the things that I wanted to add, Angela and I had talked about this, was we have sort of a both and approach here, which is another way of being inclusive, that we don't have to all be experts in the same things, but we bring it to the common table. So that to me would be one positive thing. And again, I'll ask you to be thinking about positive elements that you have appreciated in the Academy over the years. I'm now going to do the flip side for a few minutes and talk a little bit about where maybe did we drop the ball? Where did the Academy not achieve a goal, and maybe it eventually did, but where did the Academy either drop the ball or didn't make the progress we could have? And maybe we rectified that, or we're still working on it, but I don't know, Barbara, do you want to start with that?
Oh, yes, I do. This is the moment I've been waiting for. When I was ANA president, the National Labor Relations Act was amended, and that is the regulatory act that allows for collective bargaining. Prior to the act being amended, only nurses who worked in public hospitals could participate in collective bargaining. Once the act was amended, it included both private and public hospitals. And ANA asked the Academy, please give us a scholarly white paper, green paper, yellow paper, I don't care what color it is, but please put your knowledge together to help us deal with this from an evidence-based practice. The Academy refused to do it. And they didn't say it in that way. We got what I call the academic runaround. Oh, that's an interesting idea. We'll add it to the agenda. Do you have a resolution that could do this? I mean, honey, by the time they got through all the little hoops we had to go through, we'd had the battle and lost. What I mean by that is the American Hospital Association, as a generality, was diametrically, absolutely passionate, committed to no unions in their hospitals. And they did everything they could to make sure it didn't happen. They had a fantastic campaign of misinformation, and that was unionism and professionalism, like oil and water, cannot be mixed. And the nurses believe that. I'm going to be a professional. I'm not going to be oil and water and have my professionalism denigrated. As the ANA president, I went to a high meeting with the president of AHA, AMA, and their top legal attorneys. And we had this big discussion about, so what's happening now that nurses have this opportunity? And we had this big discussion, and at the end of the discussion, the labor attorneys on management side said, I'm glad most nurses aren't like you, Barbara. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you get it. You get that the National Labor Relations Act is a regulatory act, just like the Nurse Practice Act. And it gives you the opportunity through a democratic process to decide whether or not you want to participate in three things in terms of your work. That is, pay, the standards of care on your unit, and to have generally an opportunity to say where resources will be allocated. But what they said to me is, and which is what they did, we are going to replicate those items in union contracts, mostly coming out of California, that were successful. And the California Nurses Association at that time had many, many contracts with Kaiser. And in all of their labor contracts, they had a phrase that said, nurses on every unit would determine the quality of care and the principles of how staffing would occur based on patient need on that unit. What the American Hospital Association did was create a new model called shared governance. Remember that? Shared governance was supposed to give the nurses on the units the opportunity to have a say as to how care would be emboldened in their area. So ANA lost that fight because it was tarred and feathered with the union's idea being negative, not as a democratic choice. No one forces you to be in a union. You vote. You vote it up or you vote it down. And I could never understand at that time as president why, if you have federal law that allows you to talk about salary, conditions of work, and principles that are central to the arena in which you work, why would you give that up? And what I learned then is it's called a power play. In general, leaders at the top in management, I'm making universal statements here, don't want nurses telling them how resources are going to be allocated. And when you are organized in collective bargaining, you do have that opportunity.
And could the Academy, with
So-
their white paper, could we have,
My view is if the Academy...
helpful,
Well,
or-
yes, because we had the blind leading the blind. We didn't understand what collective bargaining... The AHA never talked about it from a collective bargaining standpoint. They talked about it as unionism.
Right.
So you didn't understand...
framed it.
They
They framed
reframed
it.
it, right.
Yeah.
So if we'd had the Academy's intellectual paper, we probably, at least we could have had a more what I would call productive discussion. And then I'll say this thing and then I will shut up. What I learned from that is it's a power play. And on one level, contracts with nurses empower them. It empowers them in their place of work to get things perhaps they don't. Now, there are negative things with that as well. And I think the positive outcome of shared governance is nurses did get power. But what I would say to you, what nurses don't understand is the hospital has all kinds of contracts. They contract with emergency room physicians. They contract with the radiologists. So what's the problem with contracting with nurses? Too many of us. Too much power.
Yeah.
So at some point, as I was telling Joanne, I would like to write about this because I think it's an interesting history in our profession in terms of leadership, in terms of power, in terms of interprofessional relationships. There's a lot that could be said. And that's the insight that I got from that. So I always felt sad that the Academy didn't step up to it. But sort of what they did in its place was the magnet.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's an interesting connection there. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's very good. Frank, anything that you are concerned about? That was good.
I'd go right to the global immediately. And I think there was an opportunity, and there still is an opportunity for us as American Academy of Nursing to have them become more inclusive with us, especially as you look at policy, health policy. There's many countries around the world that could lean or give us some advice or some voice in that area that we could really help advance global health policy, because we're not living in this world alone. We're only one country in this world. And we need to have a collectivism of nursing that can speak with public policy around the world. I see we're with the American Academy of Nursing and the ICN doing more work together. Maybe that's with Pam being the president of the ICN. But I think that we have members that if we could highlight them more and make them more inclusive. Because remember, how did they start? They did not start as a full member. They were an affiliate. So we disenfranchised them almost a little bit from the beginning. And now we're making them more inclusive. And the same with the migrant nurses. I think that we have got a great opportunity that contributes so much and such perspective that can help us be better at all of nursing as we lead towards tomorrow. I really, really like the fact that we're more inclusive. I like the fact that we're more transparent, but I think we still have a little more to go. And I am very honored to be in this profession and very honored to be a living legend. To be able to hear the voices of yesterday that I lived with for almost 60 years, and some of the powerful people that helped make who we are here today, coming to life more every day in this organization. I don't think that we should beat up on ourselves too much. I think these are lessons that we can learn and be better at tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of excellent points.
Yeah.
And the idea of diversity, when we talk about globalism, and we can be pretty, in this country, we have the answers, and don't we know that, no, we don't always have the answers, and other countries are doing quite well with some of their care models and with their practices. And so how do we, this is going to be a question that I ask, how do we just have a little bit of time left before I turn this back to Ken. Any recommendations to the Academy as we go forward? And I'm going to make a quick one just here. I know they're already working on how do we reflect the voices of our international colleagues in meetings like this, or in our activities, or how we go forward. So I know the board is already starting to think about that, but that would be one area based on what you said, both of you in different ways, to really bring in more global and broader perspectives. So recommendations for the Academy. Frank, you want to go first?
Well, about 5 years ago, maybe 6, I started with the Academy the welcome reception for Global Fellows. And we had on there the Academy, the AONL, ANA, NLN, and CGFNS, and we welcomed them at the beginning as a new fellow. I think that is what we need to really build on more, so they feel they're more part of. Now, I know some people might think that we're trying to be exclusive by just making this to be a global reception, but they are at a disadvantage when they come here and they all of a sudden are hearing all these things about American nursing. We need to help them along this journey so they can help us be better at what we do.
Great point. Thank you. And Barbara.
My recommendation is an old one, and that is, if you don't understand your past,
Right.
you cannot create an appropriate future. So I think the Academy needs to know its past and build on those strengths. And then I would say a moment of personal privilege. Thank you for, after 30 years of being able to call the Academy out for not doing the study.
We'll hear more from Barbara about that. I know we will.
Right, and so this is an example of your day will come. So thank you.
Oh, I wish, obviously, don't we all wish we had more time to even hear from these two colleagues? A wealth of knowledge. And 2 thoughts I want to leave, maybe 3 thoughts. The comment was made before, we're all members of the 50th Anniversary Committee along with wonderful colleagues, and we feel very responsible for creating events with the Development Committee, the Finance Committee, the Program Committee, the Board, all of you, an arc of celebration, which this year is focusing on reflection. Next year will focus on celebration with additional reflection, and then envisioning. So we want to be inspiring, celebratory. We also want to be inclusive. You won't be just hearing from living legends. You'll be hearing in different ways from each other. And then fiscally responsible. I could share with you some of the ideas, wonderful ideas the committee has come up with that would be $100,000 for one evening of celebration. No, we're not going to be doing that. But we want to be celebratory and also fiscally responsible, but have a lot of fun. And this committee is great. So 2 final thoughts. We didn't have Q&A. We want you to, which you maybe already are, starting to think about your experiences with the Academy and what you personally, your journey was. When did somebody say to you, welcome to the Academy? And what did that mean to you? So we are going to have mechanisms in place over the next 2 years to hear your thoughts and your reflections. So this is not just hearing from the 3 of us. we will have a process in place, which the board is working on now, to enable us to get your voices. And then the last thing is I would encourage you very specifically, based on this conversation and the people they mentioned, the leaders that you know, whose shoulders you stand upon, maybe to drop them a note and let them know how impactful they were to you, and reflect on those who came before, not just for the Academy, but for you personally. So with that, we thank you for attending this session, and Ken, we will turn it back to you.
I didn't talk about money. I didn't talk about money.
Thank you, Joanne, Franklin, and Barbara. To close out our session, let's take a look at some of the trailblazers and leaders who have paved the way for our Academy. We certainly have an exciting year ahead of us, and the future before us is very bright. Thank you very much.